Welcome to Citizens Assembly Thunderdome, where we test ideas and hone debate skills in a real life social political arena with the goal of holistic balance. If you'd like to participate, find out how in our podcast description. Let's start with a round of introductions from our panelists. We've got about 30 seconds apiece to tell our listeners a little bit about ourselves and what's on our mind at this moment. So I will begin. My name is Megan, and my two biggest fields of interest would be actually, I'm just going to sum it up and just say a quest for truth. And I am just thinking about how that's just some of the social media platforms are. So I will now go in, ask Staci, please, if she could introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Staci Gustafson, and I split my time between Northwest Michigan and Northern Michigan and Southwest Texas. My major focus is community holistic problem solving. Thanks. Oh, and the two things that something I'm thinking about tonight, I'm sorry. I really want to hear about this transit idea and how that might be implemented. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Staci. I'll now go over to Chris. If Chris, you could please introduce yourself.
Oh, just that I'm really happy to hear good ideas presented. And that's so far, this group has done nothing but do that. So I'm looking forward to hearing on transportation ideas. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you have a specific field of interest?
Well, I guess democracy as a principle probably would be what you guys have been calling the commons related ideas would be one thing.
Awesome. All right, Cynthia, would you please introduce yourself?
Why, yes, I will. I'm Cynthia Leonard. I'm currently residing in the Chicagoland area, and I am a promoter and organizer for Egora-ilp.org. I am also one of the hosts of Hypatia's Kitchen on Radio Hydrogen. So grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Ramses, would you please introduce yourself to the group?
Sure, Megan. My name is Ramses Naguib. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, interested in logic and human rights. And what is on my mind right now is I'm trying to program a clock. I managed to program the battery manager, and now I can control whether the battery is charging or not. But I have a problem with something called load switch, so I'm trying to figure out how to fix that. You asked, I answered, so don't blame me. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Ramses. That's really cool, actually. Sherwin, could you please introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, my name is Sherwin. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. My focus is how people are suffering in our capitalist society and the causes and potential solutions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sherwin. And now we'll go to Alex, please, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm interested in science and technology. I'm located in the Chicago area, and I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Awesome. We're happy to have you here, Alex. And now, Cezary, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Cezary Jurewicz from USA, living in the outskirts of Chicago. And my main interests are ethics and economics and animal liberation and social and economic justice. And I'm very excited to be presenting this idea about free municipal public transit because that ties into so many different things. So I think it should be fun.
Awesome. We are excited to hear your idea. And we're actually going to go ahead and move into the presentation. So today, as he said, Cezary will be presenting his idea. And we have written this up, or Cezary has, to share with others in Egora, the worldwide stock market of ideas, at egora-ilp.org. Egora is an online platform where people from all around the world can turn their ideas into policy to build a better world. So Cezary is going to start screen sharing his idea, and he's going to proceed with the reading.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Let me see. I am going to screen share here. Oh, no, I need to be here. Okay, so this idea, this is this is in the Municipal Egora. That's why the top bar here is green. And because there are 3 different kinds of Egoras. The main one, I do have a related idea to this one in the main Egora that is universal for people around the world to also explore. Actually, let me show you that real quick. Yeah, because this idea occurs, this idea that I want to present today specifically relates to Chicago, but there's also like a universal idea that people can support from around the world. And so real quick, this is a universal idea. It's in my 2-point position in the main Egora. And this is about municipal public transit being free to commuters funded by taxpayer dollars. And there's a brief explanation of that here. The other section here is actually about focusing more on like small vehicle and bicycle lanes, like developing that further. But the idea that I actually want to present is a more in-depth exploration of just this first portion, and that's in the municipal Egora that I have. Let me switch to it. And so I have it here, and I actually have been working on a few different versions, but this is the most recent one. It's the most developed one. So I'll go ahead and read it. The relevance of this is for Chicago, Illinois, but anybody else, if they find this idea to be useful in their city, then they could take it, just copy it, copy and edit it and make it for their town. Okay, Chicago Municipal Public Transit should be free to all commuters, funded by the city property taxes. There are numerous benefits to this proposal. Number 1, this plan would greatly, I guess it's misspelled, reduce traffic congestion and improve travel times. 2, it would greatly reduce energy consumption and reduce our environmental footprint. 3, it would bring us closer together as a city because it would be a great civic infrastructure that would personally engage almost all of us. 4, it would bring us much closer as a community because with people having more freedom to explore the city, we would become more connected with the various Chicago districts and the opportunities they have to offer. 5, it would help to reduce economic disparity among Chicagoans, especially helping those who need good, reliable transportation. 5, it would improve municipal public transit for all of us because if we're all invested in it, then we would want to make it the best it can possibly be. 7, it would be a great stimulus to our local economy because it would make a much more efficient use of the land. Businesses would be incentivized to make use of this new infrastructure, and so they would bring more activity to the city. This increased activity would then help to offset the costs to Chicagoans. 8, it would reduce the cost of public transit overall by eliminating the costs of fare enforcement. Or these savings could be directed to making public transit safer, especially during off-peak and night hours. 9, it would greatly reduce the use of roads and the costs of road maintenance, which would also help to offset the costs of the transit system to Chicagoans. 10, this plan maintains a lot of personal freedom for Chicago taxpayers regarding whether they want to be a part of it. The reason for this is that if a taxpayer objects to paying for free municipal public transit because they do not use it, then they could move to an area of the city that is less connected to the transit system, where their property taxes will be lower to account for this difference. So that's the idea. Like I said, anyone, if they find this idea to be applicable, they could copy and edit it and make it for their municipality. But I'm done presenting and I'd love to hear your thoughts and I'd love to hopefully come up with some good responses or maybe develop this idea further. Thank you.
Awesome. What a great idea you just shared. Sorry, I love that. So now what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to take a vote to see how many people, just raise your hand if you currently are on board with this idea. Okay, so we have Cezary, myself, Chris, Alex, Cynthia. Is that like a so-so-ish? Yeah, Cynthia's like, okay, maybe. Sherwin, Ramses, I think, and then Staci and Chris are now neutral, I believe. Is that right? Okay. Now, is anybody currently supporting this idea in Egora? Cezary is. Okay, well, maybe we can change that too. So at this point, we are going to move into our discussion. So would anybody like to start us off? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, Staci, go ahead.
So, Cezary, is your assumption that the cost of the transit now is a barrier to use, and that taking away that cost will make it much more useful?
Nodding.
Yeah, I can go ahead and answer that unless somebody else wants to go.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, people mention, the idea, well, why not just reduce the fares a little bit so it costs something? But it's not the same thing as making it free. Because sure, like I think the fares, well, the last time I was on taking the train or a bus, I think it was $2.25. So I mean, you could reduce it to $1, sure, but you're still then dealing with all the enforcement aspects. It's still a little bit of a hassle. I think it would be a completely different mental frame of mind change to actually just make it free. Just like, hey, I want to ride the train. I forgot my wallet. I just gotta jump on the train and just take a ride, over to my neighbors or whatever, go visit with them. It's a whole different, I think it's a much more communal frame of mind. I think it would definitely incentivize people to use it. They would feel like, because when you do have a fare, it makes people feel like, even though that something is subsidized, and I don't know, I have not looked into this, but I would really be surprised to find that that it's not already subsidized, like probably by a lot. But it's not the same thing as just making it free, because if people are still paying some kind of a fare, there's still this kind of a thing that that you have to pay for it. But if you're making it free, then it's more like, well, I have already paid for it, so I want to make the most of it. So people would use it a lot more. It would, they would feel like, should I take the car, or, and there's a fare, $1 or $5, whatever, it doesn't matter. You feel like, should I drive my car to work, or should I take the public transit? Well, I've already paid for the public transit. I should just use that. It would tremendously, I think, shift the usage to more public transit. I think it would incentivize the better development of it. Anyways, that ties into so many different things, but yeah, I think it's a huge, the fact that you are paying for it, it is a significant mental block. It might not be a huge economic block for a lot of people. It's probably not a big thing at all, but psychologically, it would be a huge change. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Cezary. Staci, what do you have to say?
Well, I think that it's a bit of a leap to say that just lowering the price or making it free is going to actually change the issues with getting people to use it. I think there are a bunch of other hurdles that make it not so used now that would not be taken care of just with the cost.
I just want to make a correction. It is used now, and it is greatly used. A lot of people use the CTA as it is. But it could be improved upon. It could be further developed. So no, people do use it.
I want to ask Cynthia if she has any thoughts, because she kind of had her hand like, eh.
I do have thoughts. I think it's a good idea overall, and I am in fact a supporter. I just realized that I did that today. I've been doing so many things, but I think it would have to come with some sort of idea of how to disincentivize people to just jump in their cars, and incentivize them to use the public transport. I think that would go a lot further in accomplishing what you're talking about doing, because it would in fact reduce traffic if they saw that as a more convenient, cost-effective use of their time. That's it. That's all I have.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thinking of ways to incentivize more people to actually use it. What about you, Sherwin?
First of all, I'm kind of surprised that Cezary, you would advocate this, because you're the same guy who supports flat tax instead of progressive tax. So, but anyways, it's a great idea. Obviously, I like you know, it definitely improving the accessibility for everybody is a great idea. However, I think at the same time, I think we're probably in the cusp of huge changes in public transportation, from a fixed route, fixed schedule kind of things to dynamic routing, such as possible with self-driving vehicles and Ubers and things like that. I would presume that a lot of the transportation infrastructure on the paved roads are about to be obsolete, and probably the fixed subways and things like that would probably still be useful because they travel longer distances. So the last mile problem is probably going to be solved by self-driving Ubers and things like that. Yeah, so those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing. Any comments so far, Cezary?
Yeah, this is one of those things I have been thinking about with the how are self-driving cars going to change the whole situation? How much are they going to cost, really? You know, because sure, everybody will be able to get their own self-driving car. Why even have a car? But what will be the real costs of that? Will they be free? Will the city actually provide some cabs like that just drive around? Maybe that will be a thing. Maybe it will be too expensive. Maybe that will never fly. You know, and will public transit, will that remain? Maybe, because what are the biggest costs of transportation? You know, if you do have self-driving cars, you could probably make them really small, because now they don't need to be very big. Or you could have a portion of self-driving cars that are just for like a single passenger. You could, you know, you could probably, when calling for a cab, a self-driving cab, maybe you could specify how many passengers you have, what are your travel requirements, and they will select a truck or a single passenger vehicle or something like that. So yeah, that could be very, very flexible. So maybe when you have smaller vehicles, the energy requirements for self-driving vehicles are smaller. A lot of the costs, well, like when you think about it, when you have your own car, you're only using it like maybe not even 5% of the time that you have it. Like you're paying for this gigantic piece of metal that's just taking up space most of the time. It's only being used like 1 to 5% of the time. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. The whole idea of self-driving cars, that your car is actually, or well, that instead of it sitting there, that it's actually going around and it's being used for other things. So maybe that will make transportation so convenient that the whole concept of public transportation municipal public transit will go away. That's a really interesting prospect. I do have other thoughts, but I'm going to stop right there. If somebody wants to go next.
Don't get in the towel when you're done, because I'm going to raise it.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to Chris, but first, I believe Staci said that Joy entered, so we have somebody with the name iPad. So this is Joy. Is that right? Okay, welcome in, Joy. We were talking about Cezary's idea. Cezary, if you could just put the link to your idea again in the chat, that way Joy can read it and then jump in on the discussion. And then actually, Cezary, could you just give like a 2-sentence summary of your idea, just to reiterate it, and then we'll go to Chris.
Oh yeah, Joey, basically we're talking about making all public transportation, municipal public transportation free. So just, it should be paid by property taxes within the municipality. And we're talking mostly for larger cities, larger metropolis, rather than like a small town.
And once again, we'll put the full idea in the chat too, Joy, in case you want to look at the individual points, but Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I put an article about a new innovative vehicle that looks like it's going to be the future. It's a solar panel, thin film solar on the roof, so it doesn't even need charging in most places. So not only will it doesn't need oil. It doesn't need, may not even need electricity as thin film solar improves. And these could be used in a public way as part of a public transportation system in cities. And they could be made even smaller than this one. Like Cezary just said, the model for the vehicle that we're going under is 100 years old. This giant 4,000 pound machine that needs to be plowing through our cities is just a joke. It's an environmental disaster. So I think small solar powered cab like vehicles could even have their own lanes throughout cities and be perfectly safe and even automated, so that even teenagers, people who are below the age of driving age could just jump in one of these things, and older people get the groceries they need and go back, and it could be parked on your street. They could just, and then be maintained by the city, just like public transportation is. So we're just not using our imagination. And, but I do agree with Cezary's idea that there's anything we can do to encourage people to get out of their cars. Free public transportation is part of that. People who ride currently on just use public transportation only, and in most places they're paying taxes for the roads, so they're subsidizing people's cars. They're subsidizing these giant SUVs. So as far as who's paying, that's not a just issue either there. So I think he's right on those two issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Great points and innovative ideas that you brought up. Cezary, do you have any response?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thanks for bringing that up, Chris. That should be something. And again, as you saw, there's a spelling mistake in this idea, so it does stand to be edited. But that would be definitely a point to make, is that some people are paying for the roads that they're not really using. Sure, you could say that those roads are used for the supply trucks that then, bring food to the grocery stores. But the people who have their own private vehicles are definitely using the roads more than, than people who don't. So yeah, definitely great point. And that because that really balances things out. That really puts things. It really shows how unfair the situation is. But so this is one. So this whole, what does the future of transport look like? Because maybe we will become, with these smaller vehicles, we'll be able to get more people on the road, and doing that. But I gotta tell you, it's ugly. It's really ugly, actually. Like all these cars just on the road. Like I was in the city of Chicago and just walking around, and half the things I see, and there are some beautiful buildings in Chicago, but frankly, it's just cars. It's just all these people isolated in their vehicles. It's kind of sad. Like when you compare it to European cities that are much more designed for pedestrians, where people are, it's a much more social environment. Like it's just people are more connected. It is a different thing. So it's not just about transportation, it's about community and how people relate to one another. There's this whole other idea, like I said, it's just the fact that you can just jump on the train, like you don't have to, you're walking on the street and you jump on the train just to see where it goes, and you explore something else, and maybe you find a new restaurant that you like, that you otherwise would never explore, because should I spend like a few dollars or whatever, should I spend money to explore things? Or if it's more accessible to me, people will do that more. Or for example, going to the beach. We have Chicago is located on Lake Michigan. More people would actually be using the access to the beach, because that it would be cheap. You could just jump on a bus headed that way or whatever. It would be so much more convenient, I think, much more free, like both in the financial sense and just personal freedom, psychological sense. You could go to the beach. You could go to the beach because if you forget something at home, you can easily just jump on the bus, go back, and then it doesn't cost you anything. So it's that kind of freedom that frees you up more. with a car, then you have to worry about parking spaces and things like that. So yeah, there's that psychological thing, that community aspect. It's not just about transportation technology. I yield. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great point. One of the reasons why I really support this idea, which I'm surprised that I think this might be the first idea Cezary presented that I agree with. But I support this idea because I like the idea of the community aspect, because that is true. I think about that too sometimes when I'm driving, and I'm like, it's kind of weird. We're all just in little bubbles and we're all in the same area. But, I think I like the idea of bringing people together. I also really love, I think it was the last point, the idea if somebody doesn't like this or they don't want to support it, then they don't have to, and they can just go live somewhere else. So those are the two main points that I really liked about it. I believe that we have Staci, who has her hand up next.
I was wondering, Cezary, at what point will you be doing more analysis or research on how to implement it?
I might be doing a little bit more here and there. It depends on how this idea is progressing. It depends on who else might be interested in contributing to development, to the development of this idea. Yeah, so it might be something we do together. One thing that interests me is whether the Chicago Transit Authority is subsidized through taxes right now. I actually don't know that. I don't know if half of their budget is coming from the city, or if it's, I mean, if they were actually paying, taxes on all their rails and all the things. So they're probably, yeah, it probably is. Anyways, I don't know if it's like 10%, 50%, 0%, 90%. I think that would be very interesting to know. So that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to be looking into. Other than that, I'm not sure what would be the next step to become more informed about, making this a stronger case. Thanks, David.
Great. Sherwin, you are next.
I just would like to make a comment about how American cities are designed versus the European. I think especially it was Los Angeles and Detroit, where the car companies were able to get, when they were putting together the city, were able to discourage public transportation and encourage cars, for obvious economic benefits, right? So they ended up building all these roads and no subways. So another example of I guess lobbying in the U.S. from major corporations that changes public policies in a bad way. I'm not even sure how cities can be now reconfigured. Even small cities. I remember in Florida, where even a local street was like 8 lanes, so 4 across, and there was like 2 cars on it. So you're sitting here going, wow, they built a lot of streets, So as for change, Staci, I'm not even sure how much money will require to make cities walkable and community-based again. I yield my time.
What I'm really curious about too is what are some other ways that we can encourage people to use public transportation, other than the fact that it'd be free? I think that's a good incentive, but what are some other ways that we could encourage people? If anybody has any ideas. Staci?
Well, I think that kind of ties into the community idea. And I wanted to ask how you guys feel that the public transit promotes community, other than the fact that it makes people ride together. So if we could make it a nice community experience, I think that would add a great deal to this idea.
I think that's a good point. Ramses, I don't believe you've said anything yet. Do you have anything to add or share?
Sure, yeah. So I agree with the idea in general. And regarding whether public transit improves our connection as humans, maybe in Europe, I'm not sure about North America, because people here just ride, just ride, just stop. But in other countries, from my experience, people talk, people use the time to talk to each other. Maybe you can add a rule, an act, that forces people to talk to each other during transit time. I don't know.
Mandatory conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
That'd be an interesting one. Out of all the things they make mandatory, that would be very interesting to see. What about Alex? Do you have any insight to share?
Yeah, I was wondering if, Cezary, you could clarify your 10th or your 10th point. It seems like you're saying you want to scale the tax proportional to how close you are to the public transit. Does that mean that if a bus route changes to be near someone's house, they would have to rescale their property taxes?
That's an interesting question with how, because bus routes tend to be more flexible than, for example, train routes. Maybe, with that being the case, maybe the city would have to take that much more contractually, much more serious as a contract, that they guarantee a certain bus route for a certain time period, that each bus route is kind of planned for this time. And that is interesting. See, I think what's also interesting is, well, the train and bus services, they are quite integrated, that if you pay for one and then you get off the train, like you can transfer to a bus. I don't know if it's still just a quarter or something, or like you have 2 transfers within an hour. I forgot how it's been, so that if you're taking the train, you could then jump on a bus within 2 hours. I think it's like a quarter upcharge. Theoretically, you could just make the trains free and then charge for the buses. So you could still do something like that. I think it's doable. I think especially if people are basing their property, like it could be reassessed every 5 years. A bus route could be planned for 5 years in 5-year increments or something. So a lot of details to work out, but I think it can be done.
Yeah, the other thing I think is that the trains cost so much more than to implement a bus route. So it would make sense that the majority of the cost is derived from the trains rather than the buses.
Can you, what do you mean majority of the cost is, can you explain that, your point?
Sure, so like a light railroad costs like upwards of $50 million per mile to build, but implementing a new bus route is much less expensive. And so I would think that if you're trying to offset the cost of building these systems, one would want to scale the tax proportional to the train routes as opposed to the bus routes.
Interesting point. Okay. Joy, I know that you joined us kind of halfway, but just from what you've heard, do you have any insight to share, any comments to make?
Well, I live in an area in Texas that doesn't have any public transportation or Greyhound or anything. Is 70 miles closer. I grew up in San Diego. Actually, I'm in San Diego now. Public transportation is very well used, and they have the trolley, so you can buy a ticket on the bus that will take you to the trolley, and it's basically all one fare, or cheaper if you're only taking the bus, or you add I don't remember what, it's been a couple of years since I've done it, but interchangeable tickets. And the last time I did anything, it was $5 a day, and you could ride all day, go from one end of San Diego County to the other. And I know the routes are expanding. Seniors got a discount. You can buy a monthly pass. I'm all for public transportation. The other thing is that in San Diego, you can take I don't know what it's called, but it rides the train tracks from San Diego to points north for people that work out of San Diego all the way to LA. So that's an encouragement. But as far as give it away for free, I think part of this was a discussion a while back that if you're saving on your car maintenance, you're saving on your gasoline. I think people ought to pay. I don't think taxpayers that aren't going to use the service should be taxed. So if you're a working person or regularly use the public transportation, pay something. Anything of value, you should be paying for. You give something away, in my opinion, it lessens the value. So I say pay for it, even if you had to do it by need. School kids, give them a discount, but let their parents pay something. Seniors, give them a discount, but pay something. And that's my opinion. We need to place value on things instead of give things away.
Yeah, Joy, that's a really great point. I do want to comment on one thing that Cezary had mentioned. His very last point, he says that the plan maintains a lot of personal freedom for the taxpayers regarding whether they want to be a part of it. And so it also says the reason for this is that if a taxpayer objects to paying for the free public transit because they don't use it, then they can move to an area of the city that is less connected to the transit system. And then their property taxes would be lower for this or maybe not included. I also agree with you that if you're not going to use it, then why pay for it? But I believe Staci has her hand up next.
Well, I want to readdress this idea that reducing the cost or making it free will get more people on there, because it seems like the people who need to use it, it's a money thing. So if you lower the price, that's great, you're benefiting them, but it's not, I don't think that that's going to make them use it more. And the people who are not using it, I don't believe are going to be incentivized to use it by lowering the price, because the price is probably not a barrier to the people who you want to now incentivize to use it. I think it needs to be something other than money if the whole point is to get more people to use it.
Great point. I would actually agree with that. So Cezary is next, and then after that, we're going to move into closing remarks. So before we get into that, now is the chance if you have any last thing to say before we move into those, then just type hand up in the chat and we'll go to you. But Cezary, go ahead.
I was trying to find some information about whether the CTA is already subsidized. I want to point out that it's a very different conversation to discuss whether the fares should be $1 versus $2 or $3. What the price should be, as opposed to should it just there be actually no price. Those are two very different mindsets that we're talking about. And again, there is a price for everything. You're always paying a price for something, whether that's a monetary price, it could be a social price. So the fact that there might be no charge for any fare, sure, that there is no price for that. But if that means we can create a better, more connected city that functions a lot more as a community, well, then imposing a price, putting a fee on that, it's costing you creating a better connected city. So there is a price for not charging a price. You are losing a lot of the social benefits, which and I do think they would be huge. I think it would make people really free to move around the city, make them feel like they own it more. That you could just go anywhere and jump on the train and you can, like if you're taking the train and you're going somewhere and then you see something interesting, like, oh, hey, there's a shop. I've never seen this shop before. I want to jump off the train and check this shop out, and then jump back on the train and continue doing that. But when you're putting a cost on that, whether it's 25 cents, whatever it costs, it's like, I think it might be 25 or 50 cents to for it to count it as a transfer. Well, then it's like, oh, I don't want to bother with that. So, I mean, think about this psychological impact that has economic costs. That means people are not going to these shops that they otherwise would be going to. It is slowing down the economy in that sense. It is preventing people. Oh, I've never seen where this, I want to take the train to the next stop over. I want to see what's in the other part of the neighborhood. People would use it more frivolously. They would use it more freely. And that's a good thing. That would make the city more connected. It would create more opportunities, more economic opportunities. Businesses would take greater advantage of that, because there is this whole resource. So they would want to be a part of this. So you have a cost of not implementing that, of not using this opportunity. Yeah, I really love those points about the roads. Yeah, so I mean, just, I don't know if you missed that point. You may have missed this point, Joy. But Chris made this great point that people pay for roads even though they don't drive cars. Like, that's not fair either. But at the same time, people make compromises, Sure, do you get exactly every penny for what you paid for to your government and taxes? No. What about all those, if somebody wants to protest, free public transit to make our city more connected, well, maybe instead of complaining so much about that, you should be complaining for all the bombs that we're dropping on, on children in frickin' Syria. Maybe that's where your savings should be more oriented, instead of trying to connect the city. Anyway, I yield.
All right, thank you, Cezary. Joy, what do you have to say? And Joy, you're on mute right now.
Two issues. A lot of our road tax comes from tax on gasoline, I believe. So the more gasoline we use, the more we're paying for the roads. Secondly, as far as getting off, seeing a shop, getting off the train or the bus or the trolley, public transportation, and getting back on, if we have a ticket that is going to allow us to go one direction or all day long, two directions, regardless of the fee, we can get off and on at our leisure. So if we buy a ticket from the east to the west, our final, we start in the east and we're headed to the beach or wherever, and we see something between point A and that we got on in our destination point, we're allowed to get on and off as long as we go the same direction. Or if we pay a fee and we want to ride all day long to see whatever we want to see, that can be adjusted to what we think we want to do. So go from the east to the west, get on or off at your leisure and take for whatever you want to do in between point A and B. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Joy. I think that's a great way to go ahead and end. And if you guys want to continue this discussion, I think that you guys would have a lot of good ideas to bounce off each other. I definitely encourage that. And hello to Kevin, who just came in. Kevin, I'm so sorry. We are actually just moving into closing remarks, but it's recorded. So if you want to listen to it, you can. Cezary presented his idea on free public transport, specifically for Chicago, but this could work in all big cities, and a lot of really great points. So the idea is listed in the chat. We'll put it again if you want to take a look at it. But we're going to go ahead and move into closing remarks. So Joy, would you like to go ahead and start us off?
I think I've said about all I have to say. So I yield and let somebody else go.
All right, Staci.
Thank you very much. This may or may not apply to Cezary, but it's kind of a pet peeve that I've been noticing. And it's coming up with ideas that don't have a whole lot of meat to how to implement them. And additionally, ideas are brought up and then it seems like they're finding ways to call them holistic or community or that, but that's not necessarily what's actually behind the idea. And I'm just really getting tired of these. I want people to beware of flashy political ideas or promises that lack implementation plans and which say, hey, we'll figure it out when we get into office. They may be only wanting to grab your attention with these great sounding ideas, free stuff. This is really going to help you. It's community, blah, blah, blah. And yet the idea may very well be brought up for reasons which benefit the authors or their friends who are going to make money on it. And so I think that we should, as a people, really pay attention to ideas that are not well thought out, that don't have meat to them, that don't have a way to implement them, and that are unusually attractive to the average person because it's kind of free and it's something we'd really want.
Wow, that was very insightful, Staci. And you brought up a great point that I know I didn't consider, but I definitely needed to. So thank you so much for that. Ramses, would you like to share your closing remarks?
Sure. It was a very nice meeting. I agree with the headline in general. I think it has a lot of benefits, especially that we already pay taxes, and part of these taxes are already used to fund and finance the transit system, at least here in Canada. And this is one of the rare ideas on which I agree with Cezary. And I'm very happy to know that Joey has made it to California. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ramses. Sherwin, do you have any closing remarks to share?
Yeah, thank you. I think with the advent of technology, a lot of data can now be used to make transportation a lot more efficient. We're not just talking about a network of Uber or Lyft drivers, but the future of public transportation can well be a network of moving, medium size, maybe not the size of a bus, but that might fix the problem of empty buses running schedules, which I still see, or empty subway trains running their own schedules. So great topic. I mean, that's the first thing. And the second thing, of course, the community-based aspect. North America, especially in the US, will have a great disadvantage in building communities because their cities, urban areas are so dominated by roads, and roads are a dividing mechanism, not a unifying mechanism. Thank you very much. That's my comments.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sherwin. Alex, would you like to share your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an interesting idea and I enjoyed the discussion tonight. I find the economic arguments a lot more compelling than the community-based one. I think, as Staci said, you're going to have to elaborate a lot more on the actual implementation and regarding how you're actually going to get people to use the buses, right? There are all these sort of possible preconceptions about, oh, buses are dirty, the subway seats have dirt on them, all this stuff, right? That's not necessarily explicitly solved just by the fact that you make the ticket free, right? So elaborating more on raising the standard of those areas by using these taxes in a smart way, I think that would definitely bolster the idea. Yeah, thank you, Cezary.
Great point, Alex. Chris, how about you? Do you have any closing remarks to share?
Yeah, well, the problem with transportation is the daily commute is the majority of the usage of any transportation system in the US, that 2 trips a day thing. And people factor in the time factor, and that's where public transportation can run into problems. People feel, and in most cases, they are saving time by using a car, even though they're paying more. I know that's the case with my commute. I have a very short commute, and Portland's a pretty good public transit city, but it would mean a half hour more time each day to using transportation, which I added up to be 6 weeks, 8-hour weeks, sitting in a bus or a train or walking to the station, which would be my free time if I just took my car. It's a very short commute by car. So I think with that, if people are using that factor, then it's problematic. Unless the whole infrastructure has changed the way Sherwin was talking about. So it's a tough problem. And maybe Cezary's making a bigger case like for economic stimulation. That's a question. I think that's a bit questionable. Most people have a monthly pass. They can go an extra station and it's not going to cost you anything extra to explore an area, let's say. So on that issue, Staci was right. You know, some of these claims maybe aren't fleshed out fully as far as benefits goes. But I do like the idea of it is more social. Cars are antisocial, let's face it. He's right, you know, and getting people to be able to walk more and use public transit is a more social thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And bye to Alex. I think Alex just jumped off. Yeah, it's a really great point about the time. I didn't think about that either, but that is another cost because time is just as valuable as money. Cezary, any closing remarks to share?
Sure. This has been very interesting. I'm glad I got to bounce this idea around with all of you. Regarding the time, you know, you could look at that a few different ways because, well, at least as things are right now with the fact that you have to drive your own car, you know, if it takes you half an hour or I don't know, 40 minutes to drive, that's 40 minutes of your whole attention that you're driving. If it takes you an hour instead to take a train, then sure, maybe, well, that time you're sitting down, you could read a book, you could do other things, you could do your homework or whatever else, you could socialize with other people. It's up to people how they use that time. Of course, with self-driving cars, that changes things, you know, because then people can sit in the self-driving car. I do think, but I think it's also healthier actually, because yeah, cars are antisocial. They do. I find myself living a much healthier lifestyle when I'm in Europe using public transit more than when I'm in Chicago using, well, yeah, using my car. Yeah, it's just different. I feel better. I walk more. It's great. The fares, I think, are considerably cheaper in Europe. One interesting thing is, well, this can be applied, tried, and tested on a city by city basis. I think that's what's interesting about this. It's not like everybody has to try it. One city can experiment with it. That's how we innovate, right? We try different things and we see if they succeed. We take risks. Potentially that could be done as a trial program that's actually subsidized in some way to cover the cost, you know, as an experiment. As you know, whether the federal government or a state government would want to get involved in that experiment, that's a whole other thing. It would be difficult to make that happen, but it could be done. Like that's another way to look at it, to cover the cost of the experiment. But what's interesting is that it's already being done. And I actually have not looked at the success of it, but I think it was in January of 2020, the country of Luxembourg, the country itself has a little over 500,000 people. I think they've already implemented this. The last time I heard about it, I actually haven't looked into it since. So this is another thing I want to look into. But according to that article, it said the costs, they would lose fares of 50 million euros, but they're already paying the cost is actually 600 million euros. So the lost fares are not that big of a consideration. Anyways, it will be really interesting to see how they're doing with that experiment. So I'm going to do that pretty much right after we get off here. And yeah, I think that's all I got. Great discussion. Thank you all.
So thank you so much again, Cezary, for presenting. And we'll go over to Kevin. I know you joined us at the last minute, but if you'd like to share any remarks, now is the time.
All I would like to say is that I really miss not being in the call today, unfortunately. Thank you very much for allowing me in at the end. And it's great to see everyone here. And it's to imagine standing on the thin edge of the wedge with all of you is very cool. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We're happy that you joined us. For my closing remarks, I would say overall, I agree with the idea. I also agree with the point that Staci brought up and that Alex brought up, also that Chris brought up. I agree with honestly all the points that everybody brought up, and that we probably should look a lot more into how it could actually be applied. And I think, like I said, I really like the idea of having a choice whether or not you want to support this. So yeah, I think that concludes the closing remarks. And now if we can just measure support for this idea now. So just show of hands if you genuinely support this idea. Okay, so that is Chris, Cezary, Ramses, Kevin, Sherwin, Staci, and myself. Great. Now, has anybody changed in the meantime and is now supporting this idea on Egora or going to? Awesome. Sherwin is. Okay, I believe that that's it for now, and that concludes our meeting for tonight. So thanks again, everybody, for being here. And for our viewers and listeners, if you like this idea, don't forget to support it in egora-ilp.org. Also in Egora, you'll find all the information on our upcoming meetings. And last but not least, like our page and join our group, Citizens Assembly, on Facebook, which I believe is facebook.com/group/Citizens Assembly. Thank you, everyone.